lesson plan does, but it helps you to be more deliberate. Have you ever taught a lesson? You're like, oh man, I forgot to do this. Well, this eliminates some of that because your keywords are there, your buzzwords are there. You're really specific about what it is you're doing. If we're talking about cause and effect, and I want to focus on that because again, that's a skill that children often have a difficult time with, then I'm focused on cause and effect.
Maybe we can meet again and discuss just that.
All right, so first of all, thank you so much, Angie, for modeling this lesson. And Melanie, thank you for allowing us to borrow your students. Because what happens when we have these opportunities to have a lesson modeled for us, it gives us an opportunity not only to see good instruction, but to reflect on our own practices. And that's the whole objective of a demonstration lesson, to reflect on our own practice. It's not, punitive in any way, but to look at ourselves and see, what's happening in my classroom. Are there some opportunities I'm missing? Are there some things that I'm doing really well and I need to capture? So I encourage you, if you have never taped yourself, to just tape it for your own professional development. Just tape yourself, watch it in private if you're uncomfortable, share it with a colleague that you respect and admire, and then discuss. Look at your lesson plans. Did I do what I set out to do?
We've all been taped though, right?
No.
Yeah. Oh, what did we have?
Oh, last
In
school year.
Lake, in
Right.
Mr. Lake, yes.
So Angie borrowed Melanie's class of kindergartners, and Angie started out very clear. She was very deliberate with her planning. She shared with the students exactly what she was going to do, and oftentimes demystifying education helps the students so they're not lost, and they can it'll help them focus. So Angie, starting out, what do you think went well?
I think they have a basic understanding of fiction and informational text. They understand what it means to compare and contrast. I like the real world examples that I gave them where they compared the two kids who had the white shirts, that those shirts were alike, and the kid that had the pink shirt and the blue shirt, those were different. So I think they understand what compare and contrast means and the difference between fiction and informational text.
What were the strengths of this lesson?
The strengths were that the children could talk about it. As I walked around and listened to their conversations when they had to talk about what is the difference between fiction and informational, I heard some good conversation. Some of the kids were still a little confused about calling fiction real, but as we had more conversation, they began to understand the difference.
The students were all engaged.
Students were engaged.
At no time were they not engaged. Okay, what did you do to keep them engaged? What strategies did you use? And obviously you plan for that because This is a borrowed class. This is not your class. What did you do to plan to engage them, to keep them?
Kindergarten students need to move at all times. So I did the hand gestures, the boxing gloves, the putting the arms out, using the fingers, that informational has real people, real places, and real things. So I kept them moving, which kept them engaged. And they weren't seated the whole time just listening to me. They were talking to each other. Then they were listening to me. Then they were reporting out. They went to their tables. They read in their differentiated groups. They had collaborative conversations about what they read. And then they came back and they reported out. So at all times, they were moving and doing different strategies.
In addition to those things, the other thing Angie did so effectively, there was never a lull in time. Even the time she gave them their wait or their think time was planned and deliberate. So she said, I want you to close your eyes and think. So this is your structured time to think. Within this next minute, I want you to think. And so there wasn't a lull in time. So they didn't have the opportunity to do something. She was at all times aware of where they were within that space. And that's a very effective strategy, especially for young children who tend to be fidgety.
Right.
What was your evidence that they were learning?
My evidence, of course, was their conversation, their formative assessment, asking them questions, letting them feedback. But that was just a few kids who reported out. So my evidence was their exit slip. And looking at Melanie's exit slip, all of the kids circled fiction, and there were 2 who circled informational text. And the level readers, they were all fiction. And so these two kids, I know that I have to pull them aside and explain a little bit more what the difference is between informational text and fiction. So this was my evidence, the exit slip.
Another question, Angie. I noticed several times that you modeled, and then they practiced, and then you modeled again, and then they practiced. Why do you guys think that's such an effective strategy? The model, the practice, the model, the practice. Based on what you observe, why do you think that's so effective? And not just for that story or for that grade level, but that works for a range of students, the modeling and then the practice, the immediate practice. Why do you guys think that's so effective, or what did you observe in that
Well, it
setting?
allows them to go back and work independently and stay on task.
Yeah, well, before they went back to work independently, she had them in whole group, and she modeled fiction and nonfiction, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4. So having them model over and over, even when she went to the chart and she said, "I know you can't read these words," yet she had already given them some background knowledge. This informational means real people, real settings. So even though they couldn't read the words, they had something to connect to. I've already heard this.
Well, you have to, especially at this age, but with all kids, you have to be repetitive in your teaching. Because for those kids who might not get it the first time, maybe they're thinking of something else or an example, whatnot, it's out of their head, then you go back to it. And you keep going back to it, back and forth, back and forth. And even with a lesson like this, you're going to have your kids, there's probably more than 2 who really truly don't understand. Some might be a lucky guess, some might be checking out what somebody else is writing. But it's something that you're always going, anytime we're doing a lesson, let's say if we're doing a reading lesson, we always ask the kids, what kind of story is this? And then why is it? So this is something that you just do, and we model and model and model.
And this was an introduction. So throughout the week and
Right.
throughout the year, as they're reading stories, you'll ask them, you'll put posters up in your room, anchor charts. I had one here somewhere that lets them, you'll ask them, is this a fiction or is this an informational story? I don't know where my poster is. But you will ask them throughout the year. And as I went around to the reading groups, I asked each group as well. They had a conversation about their story. And the answer they gave, I would always ask why. Why did you say it's fiction? Explain to me, to even make sure that they understand it.
So when they were able to give you that evidence, that let you know several things. Was it a lucky guess? Do I need to back up, or do I need to move them a little farther, a little faster? I also noticed several students made text to self connections and text to real world. Did any of you guys get that? One little girl mentioned that she had seen a centipede in a restaurant. Okay, so that's text to real world. And that same kid also noticed that she said, this I think this book is not real. This book is fake. So there was a synonym connection right there without her even knowing what a synonym was. So Angie gave so many prompts that they could dig up what they knew about text, about genres, about what they've seen, and make their own connections. She said something like, I think kids made this book, so the book is fake. And Angie said, why do you think it's fake? Because these pictures look like kids made them. So in her mind, in her world, in her actuality, a drawing this immature must be made by a child. So that let Angie know right answers, but maybe not for the same reasons that someone else gave.
Right, and then I said, too, that Angie kind of wove in and out the concept of fiction and nonfiction. Even though they were doing one part that was compare contrast, she would come back to that fiction, nonfiction. And then when they got to the tables and they were reading small books, she came back to it. And so it's kind of woven in and out throughout the lesson. It gave that extra reinforcement. And you were talking about the modeling. The modeling just gives a clear example of what you expect students to do, and it shows them exactly what it looks like.
There's time to practice.
I like
What?
when you were showing them how to point to the words and listen to someone else read.
Right.
When you were reading, when someone else was reading, you were really specific.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw in my room, we didn't have as many adults in my room,
Right.
and they stayed on task longer than I would have anticipated with that skill.
Well, did you guys realize the lesson was tiered?
out.
Did you notice it was tiered based on readiness?
Readiness.
What did you do to prepare them for
We did a
this
pre-assessment in each class, and this is the pre-assessment for Melanie's class. I gave them just a quick little assessment. They had to draw a bug and write a sentence. And I tiered them because I wanted to see if they could write a sentence based on explaining their bug. But I also, based on their reading groups, even though it was tiered based on readiness, I asked the teachers, and I used their lexicon scores too. I wanted to see if their grouping was similar to mine. So this top sheet is the teacher's grouping.
Okay.
And this is my grouping. So these were the kids who were approaching. You know, they could draw their bug, but they couldn't really write or explain it. Okay. And when I compared my pre-assessment to the teacher's pre-assessment, it was almost point on. This is the list that you gave me, Melanie. 2 of the kids that you had as approaching, I had as on grade level. Okay. So it was almost point on.
Okay.
But I went around the Monday before and I gave each kid this pre-assessment.
Okay.
Write 1 sentence about your favorite bug and draw a picture.
Okay.
Okay. And I just wanted to see, you know, could they write about a bug and draw a picture? And that just gave me an idea of where they were. And from here, I took it and I developed the lesson.
Okay. I think Angie made a very good point, because sometimes when we have groups based on readiness, those groups can change from skill to skill. And so I noticed today there was a group, and this young lady, without having any background knowledge, she had to be in the approaching group.
Right.
Because when I looked at her paper, I saw what she was writing, but her conversation was very mature. So if you're working on speaking and listening and presentation, then I would probably move her to a different group. But if I'm working on getting it on paper and sentence structures and those kind of things, I would probably leave her in approaching. So it is very important, as Angie said, and I'm sure you guys all know, to make sure your groups are fluid, to be able to give them an opportunity to work with another group. It was a little girl in a cardigan sweater. Her vocabulary and her text to real world connection are very mature. I don't know.
Layla, yes. I had one other understanding on here too. I had the text-to-text connections and writing main ideal sentences, because they've been doing a lot of writing. And so my pre-assessment was actually writing main ideal sentences.
Okay.
And I took this and added the understanding of text-to-text connections based on their level readers. Right, right. So we had 2 understandings here, and that's what my pre-assessment was based on.
Did you guys happen to notice which kids were talking when they were doing their catch-up and muster partners?
I did. I actually went over to one of the groups because I could tell that he was off topic, and he tends to be off topic a lot. And I might have to change his partner, by the way, because his partner is shy. So he was off topic and she's shy. And so what happened was they were sitting and there was no dialogue really going on.
Do they have the same partners all the time?
They do, but they switch, and now I can see
it's probably
right.
Yeah.
Good fit.
Right.
And it's probably a good idea to switch, because then they get to learn from someone else's experience and share what they know with
I couldn't really tell who Peyton's partner was, but she was kind of.
Just 2.
Okay.
Okay. So the routines were very clear. So I guess, Melanie, you've done some work with establishing routines and procedures so that because they were very clear, everyone knew what to do all the time. Collaborative conversation.
Right.
Did you build that into the lesson deliberately?
I built it deliberately. I know they've been having a lot of collaborative conversations in their classrooms, but I wanted to make sure that it was in the lesson. And when they first had their conversation, I didn't explain, or reiterate that when I'm talking, you're looking at me. And then when you're talking, I'm looking at you. So the second time they did it, I don't know if you noticed, I went back and I doubled back and I said, when one person is talking, you're looking at them. And when you're talking, they're looking at you. Dialogue.
Yeah. I think they know though, because they've done it enough times.
Right.
Your definition for fiction was very concrete, simplistic yet concrete. As a teacher of older students, that gives the next teacher the opportunity to build on it. So nobody goes in green. Nobody is brand new. They all have an idea of what fiction is, even if they're not using academic vocabulary, even if they're saying it's fake, it's not real. and we were looking for pretend,
Right.
but when they get to first grade, they'll add a little bit more. And then by the time they get to third grade, they understand they's are the characteristics of fiction text. And then they can begin to talk about pulling the evidence, even though they've already done this
Right.
in kindergarten.
Mhm.
So having them use the appropriate vocabulary, giving them enough to hold on to a nice solid foundation, so that the effect is that it will spiral. So now all of a sudden we're talking about characteristics, and Angie also did a good job. And I don't know if you guys caught this, and you tell me if it was deliberate or not, when you began to talk about text features. You talked
It was
about the
deliberate.
captions.
It was deliberate.
I had that in there.
Right. Did you guys want to say anything that you got out of the lesson before we go? Because you were
Well,
over your
I
time.
just, one thing that I saw is that I use a difference in terminology.
Yeah, I marked that down too.
Yeah, I say fiction and then I say nonfiction, just because I think at this level it's easier to say fiction, nonfiction. It kind of ties into science, living, non-living, like we've talked about that little prefix or whatever. But then, I saw you using the informational text, and I'm like, well, so
And
now
that's
it's
because
challenging
that's a
my thinking
common
a little
core.
bit.
It's
I'm
a
like,
common core standard.
Right.
So I use that word so they can get familiar with it in kindergarten.
Right.
And then when they hear it in first grade, they'll know.
right.
You know.
Even though it's the same thing, it made me think. I was like, well, should I use this word?
Well, the other thing about using the academic vocabulary is there are several types of nonfiction text.
Right.
Just like there are several types of fiction text. So when they begin to understand that more, they'll be able, oh, well, this is expository text, or this is a biography.
I had put that too. I had just a list of like the high frequency words, collaborative conversation, text to text, just words, and I have used those before, but I want to remember to use them more frequently to make them more part of the children's,
Did you guys observe anything today that might make you fine tune your practice, or be more deliberate or intentional with your planning or your grouping?
I like the exit slip. It was a quick, short, fast assessment. And that's something I would use definitely.
I like the, even though we had done the tiered reading, I like the other piece, the writing piece. I was just trying to figure out how would I do that? Because, Ms. Mitchell was in there.
Right.
I was in there, Angie was in there.
You
How
would
would I
have
actually
you would
really do
have
that?
to have the other kids doing something more independently that they, I don't know if you've had a chance to use those activity center cards, but they may be doing a phonics lesson where they're sorting their cards and making words.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying more during center time?
The
If
center-
it in a real situation, you
Right.
would have done that during center.
Right. I would probably have one group that I'm working with, one group that can read independently, like your top group,
Right.
and the other two would be doing maybe something related to language arts, a phonics activity, making meaning
Yeah.
words.
Because I think what you would get in the real
Right.
classroom there were quite a few
Adults.
teachers
Right.
there, keeping kids on task.
Mhm.
You would have, while you're back on the rug, whether you're in front of the smart board or working with a group there, it would be constant,
Right. And when I taught kindergarten, I would have 4 groups. One group would probably be working on sight word bingo. It's a ELA activity, but it's not necessarily reading. They're working on sight word bingo.
Right.
This group may be working on, writing color words,
Right.
identifying color words, but it's still reading.
Right.
This group may be doing something else related to reading, and then I'm working with the group.
Yeah.
Another suggestion is this. Oftentimes, we don't want to hold kids back. They know more and are capable of doing more than we will allow them sometimes. You can take your above level group, get them started, and walk away from them. And then your other groups, which your on grade level group, that's where the majority of your kids in a perfect world should be. So they should be able to do some things independently. And then that will give you time with your below grade level group. But your group that's above grade level, you can go ahead and get them started. they don't need as much of your assistance. And then you can work with those kids to move them along. And it doesn't have to be a 20-minute block. It can be 10 minutes. And you can build up their stamina and their ability to work independently without you. Same skill. Everybody's still working on shapes or fiction and nonfiction, but they just need less of you.
Can I
And
add
then
one
you-
thing? That is also the value of having an engaging lesson or activity. The more engaging the activity is that's in the zone of proximity for the student, the less likely you'll have to redirect them.
Absolutely.
If it's in their zone of proximity, do you guys know what that is? You know what that is. If it's in their zone of proximity and it's engaging, they're gonna be on task. Usually when I see children that need frequent redirecting, sometimes it's their own individual challenge, but it's usually not a respectful task.
And then also, the more that you do that, you'll develop leaders in each group who can be the teacher leader and keep the other kids on task.
What time is your lunch?
They're 10 minutes into their lunch.
So I want to thank you guys for coming. Opportunities like this always help us reflect on our own practice. So, I mean, I'm sure we've all been doing this more than 20 some odd years. Well, most of us have for sure. And so what happens is when you go back, sometimes you think, you look at your notes, oh, I should have done this, or I noticed that. If you're going to make a change, and sometimes for me as well, I've had to make some changes, and I thought I was doing okay. For the most part, I was, but make some changes and start small. Just one thing this week, another thing this week. For you, Melanie, and I'll use you since you opened up, it might be your lesson plans. Just look at, now that I know I can simplify my understanding a little bit, and I'll just shift these things to my understandings or to my do's, circle any shape that has a line on it, circle the closed figures, underline the open figures. When you do that, and that's just one small step, and then you sit back and you reflect. Do I need to do something different? This went well, I'll hang on to that. That's what these demonstration lessons in a perfect world should do for us. So ladies, thank you so much. I know you gotta get to lunch.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Angie, for the work.
Yes, that was
You're
amazing.
welcome.
Thank you so much. Angie's wonderful, isn't she?
Yeah, we love her.
Thank you for letting me borrow your children.
I can say